Today we're going to be talking about how to determine domain and range given a function or relation. So let's say, for example, that you're given a function like this one. So this function, you don't need to know this, but it's just simply y equals x squared. The only thing you need to know is that you're given a graph like this. So given this graph, what is the domain and range? Well, starting with domain refers to what's the span of this graph horizontally or left and right. So if you look at this horizontally, how far does the graph go to the left and how far does it go to the right? Start with the right. So you can see that it follows this line right here, and then the arrow indicates that it's going to go infinitely upwards or infinitely out and to the right, just like this. It's going to keep going this way. So in other words, it's going infinitely to the right. And then what about the left side? So the same idea. It's going this way, and it's going to keep expanding. I'll do this properly. So it's going to keep going up like this, up and to the left a tiny bit, and it's going to go on infinitely far. And what that means is it's going to go to the left infinitely. So in other words, negative infinity. So what that means is that the domain of this function is from negative infinity to infinity. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense. And then range is as well the opposite of that. So if domain is horizontal, range is the vertical. Maybe I'll do this up here or to the right here. So in terms of up and down, how far up does it go and how far down does it go? So we already determined that at these like endpoints, I guess you can call them, it goes infinitely upwards. So what that means is that in terms of going up, it goes infinitely upwards. And then what about down? How far down does it go? Well, let's see. If we follow this graph, you can see that vertically, it's just 0. It starts at 0. It goes down to 0. So what that means is that for range, it starts at 0 and it goes to infinity. So hopefully that made a bit of sense. Let me do one more example just to solidify this. Let me do this in white. Okay. So let's say you have this graph this time. It's going out this way. And not that it's important, but the equation for this is x equals y squared. Flipping those numbers just rotates at 9 degrees, so it's like little fun facts, but that doesn't matter. Domain. What is the domain for this? So, just like we said earlier, domain is the horizontal. How far does it go left and right? So, these arrows indicate it's going to go infinitely far like this, right? Or like that. I should draw that goes up as well. Same for down here. It's going to go like that. What that means is that it goes infinitely to the right. And what about left? Well, to the left, it's just the middle point there. It's just 0. So it goes from 0 to infinity. Okay, and then range. So range is the vertical, up and down. So how far up and down does it go? So if you follow these, I guess, endpoints, I guess you can call these, it's going to go infinitely, slightly up, infinitely, slightly down, right? What that means is it's going to be like this way, infinitely up and down, so positive infinity and negative infinity. So the range is from negative infinity to positive infinity. I just put a positive there, but if you don't put anything, it means positive, so it doesn't actually matter that much if you put the positive or not. Now, one thing you need to know about this, so this is domain and range, is the point, but in this course, they're going to want you to use this funky notation. So let me show you how this works. And it'll be weird, but just it'll make sense, hopefully by the end of this video. So starting with domain, I'm going to put D for domain, a semicolon. This part varies depending on your teacher and how they want to do it. But this next part stays the same always. So open bracket, X is an element of the real number system such that X is greater than or equal to 0. So what does this mean? Let me explain these terms. So like domain, or D is for domain. Hopefully that's obvious. The reason it's X is the X refers to the horizontal axis, right? Left and right is the X. So if I go over here, like this is the X, or sorry, I'll do it in white. This, oops, that's not white. So this is X, that's Y. X is referring to the horizontal part. That's why X is there. That little E symbol is element. So X is an element of the real number system. What that means in English is that X is a number. It's kind of this really crazy way and weird way of saying, but it just means X is a number. The line is such that X is a number such that X has to be greater than or equal to 0, which is what is here. So X is a number, so any number that exists, and it has to be bigger than 0, which is 0 to infinity. So that's how you translate this 0 to infinity to this notation. It's called set notation, is what they're going to want you to use in this course. Okay, and then range. So it's kind of similar, it's actually the exact same. What am I saying? Almost. So instead of D, you can imagine it's an R instead. And instead of X, you can imagine it's a Y. And then you always write Y, you always write X or Y as an element of real. And then the only thing that changes is the next part. So this time it's negative infinity to positive infinity. And then we have that here. Y is a number. Or better yet, Y is any number. Any number means any number that exists. So negative infinity to positive infinity is any number that exists already. So just like that, we're actually finished. So that's it. And yeah, this is domain and range, and this is how they're going to want you to write it. Set notation. Let me see how long it's been. We can do one more harder example, I guess, to test your knowledge. Oh, why is this not the right color? There we go. So imagine, let's say we had a circle, a really weird graph. You don't see too often, right? So let's say it's like this. And let's say this point is 4, and this point is 4. And it touches the axis, so that part is 0. Let's do domain and range for this. So feel free to try it out yourself. But it's okay if you can't, because we're still learning the examples of this. So let me show you how to do this one. So domain, so follow the same steps. If you want, you can skip steps if you're used to it. But domain is horizontal, right? So horizontal is referring to left and right. How far left and right does it go? Well, we have the numbers right there. It's 4 here, and 0 there. So it's just 0 to 4. And what about range? So range is vertical, up and down. How far up and down does it go? Well, it's 0 and 4 again. So range is the exact same. Now, to get full marks on your test, you have to write it in set notation. So it's kind of tedious, but you just kind of memorize this. But D, open bracket, X because it's domain. X will always be, for domain it'll always be X. You're always going to write this first part. Always going to write element of real number system. And this time you have to include the such that, because this time we have some constraints. It has to be from 0 to 4. So how would you write this? You write like this. So you write that it starts at 0. Oh my gosh, why is it so big now? So it starts at 0, greater or less than or equal to X, like that. It's kind of sandwiched, but yeah, I hope. So I guess if you don't know what these mean, it's saying that this X, it has to be bigger than 0 and less than 4, right? Because that's what these less than and greater than symbols are saying. Less than 4, greater than 0. That means 0 to 4. And then same for range. Y is an element of the real number system. And then it's the exact same thing. So Y, and like this. And that's it. Usually they give, they don't give circles usually. They give like quadratics and straight lines, but it depends on your teacher, depends on the course you're taking in the school. But if it's a harder school and a harder course, maybe the academic, then academic version, I mean, instead of applied, then they might give like some harder stuff like circles, and then you have to do a tiny bit more work, but it's not too bad. And yeah, that's it. So one more thing I want to go over is I'm going to not draw anything else. I'm going to keep using the same 3 graphs we drew here. One thing that they also want you to know is, let me start here. Is it a function or relation? These are just terms. So is it a function or relation? And they want you to label it. Is it a function or relation? And how you do this is use something called the vertical line test. Let me show you how it works. So going to this first one, let's do the vertical line test. So for this, I'm gonna do it in red. Oops. Okay. So all you do is draw a vertical line like this. And then let me try to select it here. Sheep. Oh my gosh. My bad. Let me do it this way. So draw a vertical line on the graph and then move it along the graph. At any point, does this red line touch more than one point on the graph? So like here, it touches it right there, right? Is what I mean. So if it only touches it once everywhere, then it passes the vertical line test and it's a function. So down here, draw a line any point. You can draw more than one if you want. Sorry, those are my dogs, but draw a line. Does it touch it? Does the graph touch the line more than once? It does, right there and there. So the vertical line test fails. So that means it's not a function, it's a relation. And then let's do it one more time. The circle looking thing. Draw the vertical line anywhere, it doesn't matter. You can draw like a bunch of them. And then for any of them, does it touch the line more than once? So this line, twice there, yeah, it touches it more than once everywhere. But even if it only touched it one place, it still would not be a relation. But yeah, it touches it twice, therefore vertical line test fails, and that means that it's a relation. And this should be everything you learned in the first lesson of this course. The first day is usually, they teach this, domain range and vertical line test. I just want to add that basically let me do it down here. If vertical line test fails, it's a relation. If vertical line test passes, it's a function. But yeah, that should be everything that's covered in the first day of class. So whether this is review or you're practicing for next year or whatever, this is everything they cover. Usually in the first day or two is vertical line test and domain and range. So hopefully you understand everything.